So in 2015, I found myself very ill. I've lost half my body weight. I was in a lot of pain. I could not hear anything. Both my ears were blocked and I had very, very high temperature. And that was something that kind of went on for about 5 weeks. And during that time, I was in almost like this deep, intense state of crisis. And it was interesting because it ended up becoming a turning point in my life and something that ended up actually being kind of in a strange way, kind of positive, because it changed the direction of my life from then onwards. And here's the thing, often being in a tough spot triggers something in our brains. And that trigger, when that trigger happens, is when things happen and when we wake up. And I wanted to bring that to our attention today because this is something important to understand, that we have these very basic primitive instincts of survival, right? We don't often use them. And we don't often use them because modern living is comfortable for us. And we don't get to exercise that very basic primitive instinct of survival that comes in, which actually we do need. We do need to exercise. And I want to kind of come and have this conversation with you today because I really feel that we can reframe everything that has taken place globally with the pandemic over the last year or so. And we can do something really good. We can take something really good from it rather than just really staying and really kind of just being annoyed and disappointed and frustrated and in pain over the loss and everything that's occurred from it. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't need to grieve. We need to grieve all that's taken place, right? But we do need to come back to understanding that very survival instinct that we have, and that, you know, we need to kind of give it some kind of healthy exercise. We need to be able to give it space to be. And we need to be able to also at times respond from that place. And that's exactly what's taken place this last year. And the reason I want to bring this up is because I guess I want to point to something that feels really important here. That crisis is essential. We need to experience crisis in our lives. In fact, when you look at the need psychology movement, needs-based psychology is saying how we have these 6 basic human needs. We have the need for safety, we have the need for certainty, love and connection, we have the need for variety, but we also have the need for growth, and we also have the need for contribution. And growth is one of those things that, again, is not always supported by our modern comfortable living because we have comfortable conditions. So I'm here today to have this conversation on why crisis is essential. It's essential because, for that very reason that I've explained, our very basic primitive instincts are not given enough opportunity to be exercised and used. Just like I had to use them at the time when, you know, I went through my crisis. And I want to kind of say and put the argument out there that as an essential developmental stage of our spiritual growth, this is it. Experiencing crisis is one of those, because it's essentially what creates maturity and gives us that kind of crisis, gives us that raw material for emotional and spiritual intelligence and growth. We need it in order to become more substantial. And that's an essential developmental stage spiritually. When we look at spiritual growth, we look at the good stuff. We look at energy development, psychic development, understanding more kind of on the spiritual plane and everything that's available there and those dimensions available to us. And that's all wonderful. But we do need to cover a more fundamental stage of our spiritual development. And that's becoming a well-rounded human being. One that has experiences and knowledge of adversity, one that has been tested and forced through circumstances to grow. Now, if you look at the shamanic tradition, the shamans saw crisis as yet another important initiation and a stage of the shaman's spiritual growth and actualization. So often it was thought about as the shamanic illness, or if somebody, one of the shamans, was going through a really rough time, that would be seen as that initiation. However, because often those hard times wouldn't happen, they would make them happen. There were times where shamans were, forced into the sea, shamans who didn't know how to swim. So the spirit kicked in when the ego was weak. Yeah, the ego was weak and the spirit could kick in so that the survival could really trigger in the brain. And then the shaman could save themselves and they could get themselves out of whatever the situation they were in. So often the shamans would really create these conditions of adversity and challenge, however extreme they were, so that the shamans were to experience the growth and actualization they needed. And I'm not here to promote suffering and self-imposed challenges being the way forward for our growth, right? But I am here to encourage everybody to stop playing it safe and really learn to be open to learning from life and the challenges it brings our way. That's all we need to do, rather than just thinking how we can guard ourselves, how we can make things easier, how we can have shortcuts. It's really just being open to experiencing the full texture of our human living, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and becoming the well-rounded individual and human being, creating the well-rounded perspective, allowing ourselves to be tested to grow. And yes, that does include suffering because it comes with the territory of being a human being on our planet. We will experience it. So rather than hiding away from it, just needing to be able to work with it and let it be our teacher. So let's just take this opportunity to not only look at the last year's conditions as a crisis that we needed to experience, but let's just look at any opportunity, any challenge, any circumstance that has created difficulty in our lives. Let's just try and create a more playful approach to learning from it. Let's just try to see what happens if we get to stay open, if we get to feel the feels, if we get to go down the rabbit hole and see what emerges from that. Because it's actually here as a teacher, and our soul, in order for us to grow, we need to be able to experience adversity and challenge. We need to experience that adventure in order to have that expansion. So I really hope that this is an opportunity and this conversation will help inspire you to look at your circumstances in a way that promotes that growth, promotes that curiosity, and you are staying more open to being tested, to growing, to learning from adversity, and to feeling the feels whilst it's happening. So when I came out of my shamanic illness in 2015, I did a massive turnaround in my life when I moved into doing work that I wanted, as opposed to being in a really toxic working environment. And I took some risks that didn't feel more risks anymore, because I had gone through this illness and it felt like, actually, I can do so much more. So I found that the container that it opened me to was so much bigger to experience life and to take risks. So I wish the same for you, and I hope you found this conversation useful.